Self-defense is, simply put, when we fear for our own life and out of necessity we shoot at the one who is attacking us. Hi, welcome to another episode of Criminalny Patrol. Of course, today's topic was supposed to be completely different, but as you know, from time to time when something important happens in Poland, we try to comment on these events. That's the case with Bystrzyca Kłodzka. Well, half of Poland, maybe more. Everyone is talking about it all the time, so we also want to speak up, especially since it seems that right now this discussion is just so black and white. Either give him a medal or give him a life sentence. There's no other alternative. Well, I think we need to look at this issue more broadly, more in the context of all the different things that have happened, without passing any final judgment of guilt, because there are voices like that too. Today, a man was detained who was actually demanding a lynching of this man, this 27-year-old Boris.
Do you like watching Criminalny Patrol? Help us record new episodes. Support us through Hero and watch us without ads, plus get access to additional materials not available anywhere else. Go to hero.co Kryminalny Patrol. The link is in the video description below.
Remember, it all started on Friday evening, April 10th, just before 10 p.m. Boris is a 27-year-old resident of this neighborhood. Like every evening, he just goes out with his dog. It was supposed to be an ordinary walk. Somewhere near the local store, an argument breaks out, a confrontation with three people. One is 17 years old, the other is 18, the oldest one was 26 years old. Well, an argument. According to what the witnesses say, all three of them are simply drunk. It's also being said that earlier they were bothering someone somewhere, that they're actually known for bothering people. So an argument breaks out, a quarrel between this 27-year-old Boris and those three people. Presumably some vulgar words are exchanged. So Boris walks away. It seems like everything is over. Unfortunately, there are probably hundreds of thousands of such arguments in Poland every day. Most of them come to nothing. But people who, as I say, take part in such a clash also often feel a sense of being wronged. A feeling that they've been insulted and they simply don't agree with it. They feel helpless because what can they do when there are several aggressive opponents and they're simply afraid? However, well, Boris is a shooting instructor, a man, as they say, connected with the uniformed services. These uniformed services are probably the military. I also know from experience that people who are somehow connected with the uniformed services, their sense of self-worth, their sense of being offended is simply on a higher level. Boris is an excellent shooter on a daily basis. He's an instructor, and I would even say he's a kind of marksman who teaches others how to shoot. But he's also supposed to teach others the rules of handling weapons and when to shoot at the right moment. Well, that's his job. Presumably, I think there are also people from the uniformed services in his courses, whether they're police officers, soldiers or others, and that's simply what he's responsible for. Boris, the shooting instructor, has weapons at home. These weapons are not personal weapons. So, to put it simply, this is not a weapon that was issued to him to carry with him and use if necessary, meaning to defend himself. Here's a sporting firearm. This is an automatic rifle that he simply uses for work, for teaching, for shooting with this weapon. This weapon is very popular, especially among shooting instructors. There are different opinions about its quality, but basically it's a fairly popular rifle. Caliber 5.56. Usually the magazine holds 10, sometimes 30 rounds, but as far as I know, instructors use the shorter magazine which holds 10 rounds. Boris goes home, leaves his dog and takes this rifle. And now the question is, because from the course of events that followed, he took the rifle, and the question is why, for what purpose? In various types of crimes, and in crimes such as murder, the answer to the question of intent is extremely important. Did he act with direct intent or eventual intent? These are the kinds of questions the prosecutor asks. Nevertheless, he takes the rifle, comes back, returns more or less to the area where he had the argument, where the confrontation with those three happened. We see the video later. I would say the quality of this video is average. You can see something on it. I think the police technicians will try to clean up this video somehow. That will also be extremely important. To hear the voices, because what they are shouting and saying is probably also on that video. Will it be possible to recover it? Well, we'll see. It seems so. We can see on it that Boris is standing. It's just a place, a lawn between the apartment buildings. Those three are somewhere nearby. From what we can tell, they're at least a dozen meters away. And then 6 shots are fired. First one, then 5. Balloon. One of those 3 men falls while Boris goes home. The one remains on the lawn. Then we know that his 2 friends, the younger ones, 17 and 18 years old, simply run away. They came back and saw that their friend, the oldest one, 26 years old, was still lying there. He's alive. And then in the end, they left too. And to Domu, the 26-year-old was hit. At first, it was said that there was a warning shot. It seems, at least according to one of the witnesses, that there probably wasn't a warning shot. But it probably looked something like this. When Boris showed up there, he saw those 3, and I think there was some kind of verbal altercation again. Apparently one of them started running toward him, and that's when the shots were fired. It's also important that brass knuckles were found next to his body, so that's a dangerous tool that can be a serious threat. Boris goes home, the man is left on the lawn, and the other 2 also run home. So Boris must be aware that he simply fired, that he probably killed a man. He comes, calls, probably on the way to a friend, to a police officer he knows, tells him what happened. Well, the police officer did what he had to do in this situation. Well, that's what I think, because that must have been the scenario. He just calls, informs his colleagues that he got such a call. They go to the scene and they detain Boris, the one who was shooting, on the staircase. He has a lot of money on him, his personal belongings packed, and his passport. Well, there's no denying that he probably realized he had killed a man, and he was probably figuring out how he could hide somewhere or leave. So Boris is arrested, brought to the station, and the interrogations begin. He says that he fired because it was self-defense. Well, self-defense. That's when, to put it simply, we're afraid for our own life, and out of necessity, we shoot at the one who is attacking in this case. The prosecutor's office is questioning him. The prosecutor's office doesn't believe that Boris acted in self-defense, and they are pressing charges against him. These charges are the most serious ones possible. This is a murder charge alleging direct intent, to put it simply. The thought forms in my mind, I'll grab a gun, go there, and kill you. The court here basically backed the prosecution's position. Because Boris was remanded in custody for 2 months, and right now he is in pre-trial detention, the proceedings are ongoing. Those 2 friends of his who ran away, I think friends of the one who was shot, they only showed up at the police station on Sunday. So quite a lot of time passed, probably enough for them to sober up. The witnesses say they clearly saw that they were drunk, and now this is being used as evidence against Boris for everything that happened. Well, first of all, there's that video that was recorded, that rather blurry video. Although you can more or less see how it happened, in the case of a murder investigation, that's not much. There's that video, there are also the testimonies of those friends, and the prosecutor's office claims that it was indeed a murder. There's no doubt about it. It wasn't any kind of self-defense. Besides, today, when I was listening to everything that others were saying, including some of my colleagues in the field, everyone thinks that it happened this way, that Boris consciously took the rifle in order to shoot and in order to kill. However, I believe that all possibilities should be considered here, because there is, of course, a question, and this is the fundamental question. What was Boris's intention when he took the rifle? Was it to kill, or was it because feeling offended, feeling humiliated, he simply wanted to show them that the situation could be completely different, that they would start speaking differently, start reacting differently the moment they saw a gun pointed at them? And of course, he made two mistakes. The first mistake was, I would say, less serious. The first was that he couldn't take that gun. He couldn't use it for self-defense or to settle scores with others in this way. It was a tool of his trade. He wasn't given that weapon to walk around with it, so of course he broke the rules here. If this had reached even the police, there would have been an investigation. He likely would have lost his license to practice, and he probably will anyway, because he simply wasn't allowed to do that. And that's the first thing. Secondly, if he already took that weapon, pulled it out, he definitely committed a crime. It was at least a crime of so-called criminal threats, which is basically, well, threatening with that weapon. That's already a lesser crime, but still a crime. That was the second mistake, and the third mistake, I think the most important one in this situation. Poland is not America, where shootings happen often, where people hear about someone getting killed or someone being threatened with a weapon. We've seen this many times in various situations, for example, during police exercises. In Poland, when they're shooting somewhere, everyone runs to see who's shooting because they're curious and want to talk about it at home. It was the same with some exercises, even with counter-terrorism units. You couldn't get rid of the onlookers. It was the same when there was a bomb planted. Everyone knew there was a bomb, but everyone ran to see it. That's just how it is in Poland, and I think Boris didn't have that experience here. He thought that if he pulled out his pistol, those people would obediently back down, lower their heads, and listen to what he had to say. However, they were under the influence of alcohol. Alcohol here suppresses a certain kind of self-preservation instinct. It triggers aggression. It brings out a kind of urge to act. Nobody takes it seriously, especially when drunk. That the other person has a weapon, that it's a real weapon, that they're going to shoot. Usually things like that aren't taken into account, and that's a mistake. Police officers who respond to incidents also know that pulling out a weapon in certain situations, instead of calming things down, actually triggers aggression in the other person. And I think that's what happened at that moment, that when they started saying something to each other, when they saw the weapon, maybe he told them that he had a weapon. It just somehow triggered fury in them. And probably one of them, maybe all of them, but one of them for sure, ran toward him. We know there was a pair of brass knuckles lying there, so it's possible he was running toward him with those brass knuckles, and Boris just started shooting. I would still, in this situation, separate the two matters. The first one in front of the store and the second one later on. I mentioned that he committed other types of crimes, but in my opinion that doesn't rule it out. Not to take into account that when he was shooting at the second person, when he was shooting, he might have been mistaken about the circumstances, meaning simply the danger that arose in his mind. Maybe he exceeded the limits of self-defense, or maybe, well, he was shooting because he felt threatened in some way. So that also needs to be taken into account. You can't run away from that. Saying today that there was no self-defense in all of this, you can't rule out that there actually was self-defense. That's what this trial is for, which will take place. That's what all kinds of examinations are for, including ballistic ones, like from what distance the shots were fired, where he aimed, and at what spot. I mentioned that he's an experienced shooter. He fired 6 times. The magazine, I assume, had 10 rounds, 4 were not fired, and if the magazine was simply full, it shows that Boris was somehow aware and in control of the situation. Well, we need to answer the question, why did he shoot only one person? If he wanted to kill, why didn't he shoot the others? As a shooting instructor, he probably wouldn't have had any trouble hitting the other 2 as well. In this case, that's hardly surprising, is it? Of course, people are extremely divided. For some, especially people from the neighborhood, people who see everything that's happening every day, well, as usual, I guess, but there's something to it. They have complaints both about the police and the city guard because there are quite a lot of aggressive people there. Someone mentioned that recently there was some blood in front of that store. Well, that obviously affects the sense of security, and it also stirs up emotions that simply translate into behavior. For the people who live there especially, but also, I think, for many Poles, Boris is a kind of neighborhood hero. They want him to have professional defense, so they organized a fundraiser. This fundraiser for Boris, for lawyers, so to speak, has probably exceeded expectations because those who organized it wanted to collect 70,000 and recently it was 376,000 zlotys. There are over 7,500 people who have supported him. It looks like that's not the end either, so you can see that people's involvement is just enormous, and for these people, I'll say it again, Boris is a hero. But there is also another side. There are those who say that Boris shot and killed a man in cold blood, that he simply went for the rifle, went for the weapon, and started shooting. And he came to that lawn right there between the apartment blocks with the intent to kill. Well, there are also, I would say, extreme situations. Yesterday, a man was also detained, a 29-year-old from the Kłodzka district. It turned out that he was simply inciting such hatred. I think we've all seen this man because those videos appeared somewhere, as they say, in the public sphere. He was inciting people to commit a crime, to put it bluntly, to kill Boris. The police tracked him down. This man has been placed in pretrial detention and will be held accountable for inciting hatred and crime. It looks like he might have been under the influence of drugs as well because he has a second charge for drug possession. So these are extreme situations. But such voices are also being heard. It's important that in this process, because it will be significant for all of Poland in this process, to explain everything that we often talk about on the channel about intent, because intent is still being weighed. Did Boris actually leave with the intention to kill? Because that will be the key question and of course the key answer for Boris. Of course, the fact that the aspect related to self-defense will be taken into account has enormous, I would say, fundamental significance in this case. Because right now we know that he fired, we know that he killed a man, and those are the facts. And there is no doubt about that. However, right now he faces life imprisonment. If this aspect is taken into account, if it is considered, then it could be that it will be seen as exceeding the bounds of self-defense. Then the court may impose a completely different sentence. Of course, it's also true that the range of sentences for homicide is decided by the court. The range for homicide, when it comes to sentencing, is quite broad, because if that charge stands, the minimum sentence could be 10 years in prison. So everything in this case is of course possible, and nothing is certain yet. And I'm saying we did this episode mainly so that it wouldn't seem like, because that's how it looks right now. This division is very black and white, either a hero, as I said, or a killer. But that's just not how it is. Well, of course, this case has basically just started in terms of the legal process. We will certainly all be watching everything that happens in the courtroom with great interest. Because it seems to me that nothing in this case is obvious, even though at first glance it appears to be obvious. And that's all for today's episode, just a quick one. Of course, subscribe to our channel, and as always, take care.
Do you like watching Criminalny Patrol? Help us record new episodes, support us through Hero, and watch us ad-free, plus get access to extra content you can't find anywhere else. Go to herohero.co/criminalnypatrol.
/Kryminalny Patrol.
The link is in the video description below.